There are places so secret, even God's house won't speak of them. For centuries, the Vatican has hidden artifacts, books, and truths so terrifying. They could rewrite everything we know about history, religion, even reality itself. Why were these 76 secrets buried? And what happens if the world ever finds out? Stay with us. What you're about to hear might just change your faith in everything. But first, like and subscribe before the next secret disappears forever. The greatest secrets aren't always the ones that are hidden. Sometimes, they're the doors no one dares to open. All around the world, there are tombs that remain untouched for thousands of years, not because they're lost, but because people are afraid of what might be inside. Let's begin with the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, the man who united an empire, the man who dreamed of immortality, and who may have built an underground replica of his kingdom, complete with rivers of mercury, a jeweled sky, and deadly traps for intruders. To this day, the central burial chamber has never been opened, not because we can't, but because modern surveys show mercury levels in the soil so high they could be lethal. And archaeologists fear that one wrong move could destroy everything inside. Or worse, release something the ancient world meant to seal forever. Next, we journey to the windswept steppes of Mongolia. Genghis Khan, one of the most powerful rulers in history, also left behind one of its greatest mysteries. No one knows where he is buried. No marker, no monument. Just stories of an elite funeral procession that killed every witness to keep the site secret. Horses were said to have trampled the ground to erase all signs. Some say rivers were redirected to flood the tomb. And local tribes still consider the land sacred, forbidding anyone to search. Many have tried using satellites, AI, even ground-penetrating radar. All have failed, and perhaps that's the point. Perhaps his tomb was never meant to be found. But not all mysteries lie in jungles or deserts. One of the strangest tombs ever discovered was hidden beneath a modern construction site in Alexandria, Egypt. In 2018, a massive black granite sarcophagus was unearthed, sealed, featureless, and nearly 30 tons in weight. It had no inscriptions, no name, just a smooth, ominous surface. Some speculated it might contain the remains of Alexander the Great. Others warned of a deadly curse. When it was finally opened, what they found was unsettling. 3 skeletons floating in a foul reddish-brown liquid. No treasure. No identity, just decay and silence. Who were they? And why would someone go to such lengths, hauling granite from Aswan hundreds of miles away for an anonymous burial? 3 tombs, 3 riddles. 3 reasons why the Vatican and many others choose silence over answers. Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden. Sometimes we're simply not ready to face it. Some truths aren't buried in tombs or locked in vaults. They're hidden in plain sight, inked on ancient scrolls, drawn onto fragile parchment, whispered between the lines of forgotten languages. They are stories the Vatican never wanted us to finish reading. Let's begin with a map. Not just any map, but one that shouldn't even exist. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis created a world map. But this was no ordinary chart. It was made from fragments of more than 20 older maps, some said to be Roman, others Greek, and even some from the lost library of Alexandria. But what stunned scholars most was what the map showed. Not just Africa and South America, but Antarctica, in perfect detail, 300 years before modern explorers even discovered it. And here's the twist: Antarctica was drawn without ice, as if the map was made when the continent was still green, still alive, still warm. But that would mean someone mapped it over 6,000 years ago, before any known civilization had the tools to cross oceans, before the Bible was even written. How could that knowledge have survived? Who were these map makers lost to time? And why does the Vatican, a religious institution, possess some of the rarest maps ever made? Some say the answers lie in archives no outsider has seen. Others believe those secrets were never meant for the public, because maps, after all, are more than geography. They are gateways to hidden history, and sometimes to hidden treasure. In 1952, archaeologists found something strange inside a cave near the Dead Sea. A scroll, not made of parchment or papyrus, but copper. Etched into it were directions, detailed, precise, chilling directions, to 64 hiding places, containing tons of gold and silver. The locations referenced valleys, aqueducts, ruins, some familiar, others lost to time. And yet, no one has ever found a single coin. The Vatican owns ancient Hebrew scrolls older than the Bible itself. So why hasn't the copper scroll ever been fully translated by their scholars? Could it point to something more than treasure? Could it lead to knowledge that challenges the very roots of religious authority? The Dead Sea Scrolls themselves were locked away in Vatican archives for decades before parts were finally released to the world. Even now, some scrolls remain unpublished. Why? What do they say? What kind of truth needs to be hidden for thousands of years? Then, there is a book that speaks in no known tongue, the Rohank Codex. Found in Hungary in the early 1800s, it contains hundreds of pages, thousands of symbols, and not a single expert has been able to decipher its language. Not linguists, not cryptographers, not even AI. The illustrations inside the book are even more bizarre. Christian crosses appear next to Islamic symbols. Soldiers march beside monks. Pagan rituals unfold beneath scenes of battle and prayer. It's as if the book came from a world where all faiths were fused, or from a place that no longer exists. Some believe the Codex is a prayer manual from a secret cult. Others say it's a warning, one disguised so well, no one alive can understand it. There are even whispers that the Vatican once tried to purchase the manuscript, and when denied, quietly buried every reference to it in academic texts. Because if a book like that can't be translated, maybe it wasn't written for us. Maybe it was left behind for someone else. 3 artifacts, a map that knows too much, a scroll that promises gold or apocalypse, and a book written in the language of ghosts. What do they have in common? They all raise one terrifying question. What if history didn't forget these secrets? What if someone made sure they were never remembered? Some mysteries aren't buried. They're carved in stone, not as myths, but as monuments that mock the limits of human capability. Because when you stand before them, you don't wonder what they are. You wonder how they exist at all. Let's begin in India with something that shouldn't be possible. The Kailasa temple, carved downward straight into a single mountain of solid basalt, not built, but excavated top to bottom, 30 meters high, 300 meters long, over 400,000 tons of rock removed, without dynamite, without machines, without steel. Historians say it was made in the 8th century in just 18 years, but that would mean removing 60 tons of rock every day. With chisels and hammers, that's not architecture, that's obsession. And it's not just the size. The carvings of gods, demons, and celestial beasts are intricate, perfect, symmetrical. There are entire chambers, pillars, shrines, hidden tunnels. And perhaps strangest of all, millions of Sanskrit characters carved deep into the walls, still untranslated. What if this temple wasn't just a place of worship? What if it was a library of secrets? An archive left behind by a civilization far older and far more advanced than we admit. Now travel east to China, to Longyu. In 1992, a farmer tried to drain a pond near his village. What he discovered changed everything. Beneath the water were caves, massive, symmetrical, and perfectly chiseled. Soon they found 24 of them, each with flat ceilings, precise columns, and wave-like carvings running along every surface. Not a single tool mark, not a single human bone, no soot from torches, no writing on the walls, no record of their construction. They shouldn't be there. And yet they are. Some say they were grain storage. Others think they were bunkers. But the craftsmanship suggests something far more intentional. Every cave shares the same design, down to the patterns on the walls, as if one mind or one central force directed them all. Geologists say they're over 2,000 years old, but the Chinese historical record, one of the most complete in the ancient world, never mentions them. Why? Did someone erase their existence? Or were they never meant to be remembered? Now to Egypt, to a monument that never stood but still changed history, the unfinished obelisk of Aswan. It lies flat in a quarry, still attached to the bedrock. If completed, it would have been the largest stone ever moved by humans. 42 meters tall, weighing 1,200 tons. That's the weight of 200 elephants, carved with primitive tools, split from the mountain with wooden wedges soaked in water. Maybe. But what were they planning to do with it? How would they move it down to the Nile, float it across the river, raise it into position without cranes, pulleys, or diesel engines? No one knows. And then the crack appeared. The work stopped. And the obelisk was left behind like a frozen moment in time. Some say it was just an engineering failure. Others think the stone broke because it wasn't meant to be lifted, at least not by human hands. 3 sites. One carved into a mountain, one hidden beneath farmland, one never completed, all built with methods we still can't fully replicate, all ignored by mainstream history, all whispering the same truth. That somewhere in our past, someone had knowledge we no longer possess. Some pyramids were never meant to be found, and the ones we're forbidden to study may reveal the most terrifying truths of all. In 1945, an American pilot flying over China spotted a white pyramid. It was massive, larger than Giza, Its surface gleamed as if made from polished stone. He reported it. Photos were taken. Then silence. The area was locked down. Officials claimed it was just a burial mound. But satellite images later revealed dozens of pyramid-like structures in the region, many aligned with constellations. Why were they hidden? And who built them, if not the dynasties we know? Now shift to Turkey. Göbekli Tepe, a temple buried for over 11,000 years, built by hunter-gatherers long before agriculture. Massive stone pillars carved with animals and symbols, too advanced, too early. And then it was deliberately buried. Why seal away something so sacred? Were they hiding it from enemies or from us? And then the Black Pyramid of Egypt, mentioned in 1737 by explorer Frederick Norden. He drew it, measured it, described it as made from black stone. But today, no trace remains. Was it real? Was it destroyed? Some believe it was never a tomb but a machine, built to harness energy, a race to protect a narrative. 3 pyramids, one hidden, one buried, one erased. They don't just challenge our history, they suggest we've only seen the surface. And underneath lies a civilization we were never meant to remember. What if the past didn't disappear by accident? What if it collapsed as a warning? Long ago, in the heart of Egypt, there stood the greatest library the world had ever known. The Library of Alexandria, home to over 700,000 scrolls, knowledge from Greece, Egypt, India, and beyond. Science, philosophy, magic. It was the internet of the ancient world. And then it burned, maybe by war, maybe by decree, or maybe by design, because some knowledge is too dangerous to survive. What was lost in that fire? Blueprints for machines, cures for disease, histories of civilizations far older than we admit. Some believe copies were taken, hidden, preserved, maybe even beneath the Vatican itself. But not all collapses involve fire. Some vanish beneath the sea. 10,000 years ago, between what is now England and mainland Europe, there was land, Doggerland, a lush green paradise, rivers, forests, people. Then the ocean rose, and a tsunami swept it all away. Today it lies buried beneath the North Sea. Fishermen still pull up ancient bones, tools, fossils, but no cities, no temples. Just silence. Was Doggerland Atlantis, or just the first warning about how fragile our world really is? And then there are the Clovis, an ancient culture in North America, masters of stone tools, hunters of mammoths, gone without a trace. No war, no famine, just gone. Some blame climate change. Others say a comet struck the Earth. But the truth is we still don't know. They vanished, and all they left behind were questions. 3 civilizations, 3 disappearances, 3 warnings. We like to think progress is forever, that once a culture rises, it cannot fall. But history tells a darker story, one where silence replaces knowledge, where oceans erase cities, and where even the most brilliant people can simply disappear. Maybe the past isn't just a memory, maybe it's a prophecy. Not every artifact in a museum was made by human hands. Some are too precise, too advanced, too alien. Across the ancient world, a few objects stand out like glitches in history, not because they're old, but because they shouldn't exist at all. Let's start with a mystery from the Roman Empire. The dodecahedron, 12 faces, perfect pentagons, circular holes in each one varying in size. Over 100 of these bronze objects have been found across Europe. None were discovered in Rome, and not a single ancient text ever mentioned them. Were they tools, ritual items, or something else? Some researchers believe they were ancient rangefinders or astronomical devices. Others suggest they were transmitters, primitive antennas. Theories even link them to lost Atlantean or extraterrestrial knowledge. Because here's what no one can explain: their geometry is too perfect for the tools of the time, and their design, strangely similar to modern signal amplifiers. Now go south to the jungles of Costa Rica. There, hundreds of massive stone spheres lie scattered across forests and fields. Some weigh over 15 tons, perfectly round, perfectly smooth. No metal tools, no blueprints, no explanation. They were made by a civilization that vanished without a trace. But why were they so precise? Some believe the spheres align with constellations. Others suggest they are energy markers, placed to interact with forces we no longer understand. And then there's the radical theory that the spheres are navigation beacons, signals laid out for something watching from above. Still sound far-fetched. Then consider this. Deep in California's Death Valley, there are stones that move on their own. Massive slabs of rock gliding silently across dry lake beds, leaving long, winding trails behind them. No footprints, no wind strong enough to push them, no human interference. Scientists eventually blamed thin ice sheets and rare weather conditions. But even now, not all the stones move. Some sit for decades, then suddenly shift, as if waiting for a signal or an alignment. What if they aren't just geological quirks? What if we're looking at a system of interaction, a technology beyond metal or machines, built on frequency, vibration, or something we haven't yet named? 3 objects: a bronze polyhedron, a granite sphere, and a wandering rock. They come from different continents, different cultures, different millennia, but they all share one haunting quality: they do not fit, not in our timeline, not in our understanding, and maybe not on our planet. Not all secrets are lost in the sky. Some are buried beneath our feet, hidden in tunnels, chambers, and catacombs so ancient no one dares to open them, because some places weren't meant to be found. Let's begin in Egypt, but not with pyramids, with something even older, even more terrifying: the Hawara labyrinth, first described by Herodotus over 2,000 years ago. He said it had over 3,000 rooms, half above ground, half underground, filled with tombs, gods, and sacred crocodiles. A monument so vast, he claimed no Greek structure could compare. Then it disappeared. For centuries, people thought it was a myth, until 2008, when a team of archaeologists scanning the desert near the Hawara pyramid found something. Underground chambers, deep, massive, and unexplored. They wanted to dig, but permission was denied. The Egyptian government locked the data. No report was released, and the site sealed. Why? What's down there that we're not supposed to see? Ancient technology, pre-dynastic knowledge, or something even older than Egypt itself? Now let's go to Turkey, to Derinkuyu. In 1963, a man knocked down a wall in his basement and discovered a tunnel. That tunnel led to rooms. Those rooms led to halls. And soon, they uncovered an entire underground city, 18 levels deep, capable of sheltering 20,000 people, complete with wells, ventilation shafts, even a church. No one knew it was there. No one knows who built it or why. Some say it was for hiding from invaders. Others believe it was to survive a catastrophe, maybe nuclear, maybe celestial, and some whisper it was a haven from an enemy not of this earth. But the strangest part, there are over 200 similar underground cities in the region, all connected, all silent, as if the earth itself tried to remember something humanity forgot. And then to the United States, Mount Shasta, California, a mountain wrapped in cloud and mystery. Some say it hides a city, Telos, home to the last descendants of Lemuria, an ancient, spiritually advanced race said to have vanished beneath the sea. But not all of them died. Some escaped and built a new home deep within the mountain, a place of glowing crystals, healing frequencies, and consciousness beyond human. Strange lights have been seen above Shasta, disappearing hikers, people who emerge days later with stories of voices in their minds or visions they can't explain. Is it fantasy? Or are the oldest truths the ones we're most afraid to believe? 3 places, a labyrinth the world isn't allowed to see, a city no one remembers building, and a mountain that may not be empty. Sometimes what lies beneath us is darker than the sky above. Not all bodies decay, and not all beings are human. Some remain untouched by time, others by design. And the more we study them, the less we understand what it means to be mortal. Let's begin in Siberia, a discovery that defies biology. In the frozen depths of Yakutia, archaeologists uncovered a burial mound nearly 800 million years old. Inside was a woman, perfectly preserved, skin soft, hair intact, organs still flexible, and no signs of decomposition. Locals called her the Stone Princess. Her body was unlike any known mummy. No embalming fluid, no drying, just flawless preservation. Her clothing was woven with fibers not native to the region, and her face bore features unlike the native people. Was she royal? Was she a priestess? Or was she something else entirely, something not of this earth? Then to Rome, to the Vatican, where the church guards the remains of saints who should have turned to dust centuries ago. They're called incorruptibles, bodies that refuse to decay, skin still pliable, eyes still clear. Even after 300, 400, 600 years, Saint Bernadette, Saint Catherine, Saint John Vianney, all untouched by rot. Some say it's divine intervention. Others call it a miracle of faith. But here's the eerie part. Many of these saints predicted visions, end times, revelations they claimed came from a higher power, and many of those predictions remain locked away, unread, unreleased. What were they told, and why keep it hidden? Now to France, 1890. In the village of Castelnau, an anthropologist discovered 3 bones, a femur, a tibia, and a massive arm fragment, twice the size of modern human bones. He calculated the being would have stood 11 feet tall. Other giant bones were soon found nearby. then sent to academic institutions, then lost, vanished. Some say it was a mistake, others say it was intentional, because the existence of giants would shatter both science and scripture. But here's the pattern. In every ancient culture, from the Bible's Nephilim to the Norse Jotnar, we're told giants once walked the earth. So why do their remains keep disappearing? 3 bodies, one frozen, one sacred, one silenced. All of them whisper the same truth, that human history may not just be incomplete, it may be wrong about who or what we really are. Not all bodies decay, and not all beings are human. Some remain untouched by time, others by design. And the more we study them, the less we understand what it means to be mortal. Let's begin in Siberia, a discovery that defies biology. In the frozen depths of Yakutia, archaeologists uncovered a burial mound nearly 800 million years old. Inside was a woman, perfectly preserved, skin soft, hair intact, organs still flexible, and no signs of decomposition. Locals called her the Stone Princess. Her body was unlike any known mummy. No embalming fluid, no drying, just flawless preservation. Her clothing was woven with fibers not native to the region, and her face bore features unlike the native people. Was she royal? Was she a priestess? Or was she something else entirely, something not of this earth? Then to Rome, to the Vatican, where the church guards the remains of saints who should have turned to dust centuries ago. They're called incorruptibles, bodies that refuse to decay, skin still pliable, eyes still clear. Even after 300, 400, 600 years, Saint Bernadette, Saint Catherine, Saint John Vianney, all untouched by rot. Some say it's divine intervention. Others call it a miracle of faith. But here's the eerie part. Many of these saints predicted visions, end times, revelations they claimed came from a higher power, and many of those predictions remain locked away, unread, unreleased. What were they told, and why keep it hidden? Now to France, 1890. In the village of Castelnau, an anthropologist discovered 3 bones, a femur, a tibia, and a massive arm fragment, twice the size of modern human bones. He calculated the being would have stood 11 feet tall. Other giant bones were soon found nearby, then sent to academic institutions, then lost, vanished. Some say it was a mistake, others say it was intentional, because the existence of giants would shatter both science and scripture. But here's the pattern. In every ancient culture, from the Bible's Nephilim to the Norse Jotnar, we're told giants once walked the earth. So why do their remains keep disappearing? 3 bodies, one frozen, one sacred, one silenced. All of them whisper the same truth, that human history may not just be incomplete, it may be wrong about who or what we really are. Sometimes the greatest danger to the truth isn't a lie, it's silence. For centuries, knowledge has been collected, then erased, books banned, scrolls burned, libraries emptied. But where did that knowledge go? And who decides what the world is allowed to know? Let's begin with the most guarded vault on earth. The Vatican Apostolic Archive. Over 50 miles of shelves, more than 35,000 volumes. And only a handful of people on the planet can access it. No cameras, No journalists, no unsupervised visitors. Inside may lie documents from every empire in history, letters from kings, maps of ancient worlds, testimonies of miracles or monsters, even writings that contradict the official Bible. Some researchers believe there are hidden gospels, proof of lost civilizations, even records of contact with something non-human. Why hide them? Because knowledge is power, and sometimes power is dangerous. Now travel back in time to Pergamon, once the greatest library in Asia Minor. It rivaled even Alexandria, home to over 200,000 scrolls. Until the Roman Empire took it, the scrolls were sent to Egypt, then scattered, lost, or absorbed into secret archives. Many believe those scrolls contain texts from Babylon, Sumer, and even older cultures. Documents describing technologies, celestial alignments, and rituals long forgotten. But none of them were ever returned to the public. Why? Because to control a civilization, you must first control its memory, and finally look at what didn't survive. The Gnostic Gospels, the Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Mary. Dozens of ancient texts removed from the official Bible, branded heresy, burned or rewritten to fit a safer story, entire philosophies erased, alternate timelines silenced, and voices once sacred reduced to myth. Why? Because they taught that divinity could be found within, that humans were not powerless, that heaven was not above but already inside us. 3 examples: a vault that no one may enter, a library that was taken, and a truth that was edited. The war on knowledge didn't end in the Middle Ages. It's still happening. And the most terrifying question of all is what's been hidden, but what's been rewritten to look like the truth. Some treasures aren't locked in vaults. They're hidden in plain sight, behind velvet ropes, behind do not enter signs, and behind silence. Because the most dangerous relics aren't the ones that shine. They're the ones that speak. Let's begin in Lebanon, at Baalbek. Among Roman ruins stands a structure that defies explanation, the Temple of Jupiter. Its foundation is built from 3 stone blocks, each weighing nearly 800 tons. Even modern cranes would struggle to lift them. Yet they were moved and stacked over 2,000 years ago. The Romans claimed credit, but they never explained how. And nearby, even larger blocks remain in the quarry, some over 1,200 tons. Why carve such massive stones and then leave them behind? Some believe the foundation predates the Romans, belongs to a civilization long erased, or worse, intentionally buried. Others say Baalbek was never meant for humans at all, that it was a landing platform for something that came from the sky. But here's the twist. The Vatican owns early maps and texts describing Baalbek, but they've never released them. Why? Now to Egypt. 1945, a farmer in Nag Hammadi discovers a sealed jar. Inside, ancient scrolls, gospels, writings attributed to Thomas, Mary Magdalene, Judas. They told a different story, one where Jesus taught that the kingdom of God was within. That salvation came not from obedience, but awakening. The church called them heretical and buried them for centuries. Even today, many of these scrolls are locked away, stored in archives, untranslated, unpublished. Because if these texts are true, they change everything. And then to Rome, the catacombs of Domitilla, one of the oldest underground Christian burial sites. Inside, murals, paintings of saints, angels, even Jesus. But here's what makes them terrifying. Some of the earliest depictions show Jesus without a beard, surrounded by symbols not found in the Bible, wearing robes more Roman than Jewish, and standing next to female figures believed to represent divine feminine energy. These images have never been shown to the public in full. Some were restored, others quietly faded. Why? What was painted there that could challenge the face of faith? 3 relics, a temple too large to be human, scrolls that speak of forgotten gospels, and paintings that hint at something older than the church itself. They weren't hidden because they're lies. They were hidden because they might be the truth, and the world might not be ready for it. Some beings weren't erased from history. They were erased from Scripture. Beings too strange, too powerful, too close to the truth. Let's begin with the giants, the Nephilim, mentioned in Genesis 6. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, they bore children to them, mighty men of old, angels and humans, interbreeding, creating a race of giants. They were said to have walked the earth before the great flood, tall, violent, and dangerous. Later texts like the Book of Enoch describe them in horrifying detail, teaching humans forbidden knowledge, weaponry, alchemy, witchcraft. Then came the flood, and their story vanished. The church later declared these stories apocryphal, removed from canon, silenced. But here's what's strange. Almost every ancient culture has tales of giants. The Greeks, the Norse, the Sumerians. Were they all imagining the same myth or remembering the same truth? Now to the sea, to Babylon. Ancient texts speak of Ons, a creature who emerged from the Persian Gulf, half man, half fish, wearing strange armor. He taught humans writing, science, law. Day after day, he rose from the water, then returned to the depths. The Sumerians worshipped him, called him divine, but later texts cast him as a demon, a deceiver, something that came from below to mimic the divine. Modern scholars call him a myth, but what if Ons wasn't alone? What if the oceans still hold others? Now to the river that may end it all, the Euphrates. In Revelation 9 it is written, "Release the 4 angels bound at the great river Euphrates." Bound, imprisoned, not heavenly messengers but fallen beings, locked beneath the earth, waiting for a specific time to be released. In recent years, the Euphrates has begun to dry. Satellite images show strange structures under the riverbed. Sounds unexplained have been reported in nearby caverns, and whispers of awakening are growing louder. What if those angels weren't metaphors? What if they're real, and their time is near? 3 beings, giants born from angels, a fishman who rewrote human civilization, and celestial prisoners waiting for release. They weren't forgotten by accident. They were removed. Because if they're real, then the world we live in is nothing like we were told. Some treasures aren't lost in the jungle or at the bottom of the sea. They're locked in rooms, guarded, sealed, forgotten by history, but remembered by those who never wanted them found. Let's begin in Rome. Beneath Vatican City lies a massive underground complex. It's not just archives, it's a vault, a labyrinth. Rumors speak of golden relics from Jerusalem, ancient statues from Babylon, even crates marked with the seal of Templar Knights, but none of it is on public record. No images, no lists, just whispers from those who once worked beneath the Vatican, then vanished from public life. Why hide treasure? Because treasure isn't just gold, it's proof. Proof of events that were never supposed to exist, of cultures that challenged the church's timeline, of stories that might undo everything we were taught to believe. Now to Egypt. During Rome's conquest of the Nile, thousands of artifacts were seized, temples stripped, obelisks relocated, gold melted and repurposed. Many of these treasures were sent to Rome, some to Caesar's vaults, others to the early church. And while some are on display in museums, others disappeared into private collections, or underground tunnels, or Vatican basements. What if the gold wasn't the point? What if some of those artifacts carried inscriptions, maps, or even texts that revealed the true power of ancient Egypt? The kind of power that doesn't just build pyramids, but rewrites the human story. Finally, Pergamon, one of the greatest libraries of the ancient world, home to over 200,000 scrolls. It rivaled even Alexandria. Then came the Roman Empire. The scrolls were seized, said to be gifts to Cleopatra, but many were never seen again. Some believe they were transferred to Rome. Others say they were absorbed into the Vatican's secret collection. What did those scrolls contain? Theories range from lost philosophies to forbidden mathematics to descriptions of rituals so precise they resemble modern science. But whatever they held, they are now gone. 3 missing caches, a vault beneath the church, a river of gold stolen from pharaohs, and a library vanished under Roman hands. They may be in different places, but they share one chilling detail. They all disappeared after someone decided the world wasn't ready for them. If the heavens declared glory, what else did they send down? For centuries, sacred buildings have pointed to the stars. But some structures do more than align with constellations. They whisper of contact, of visitors, of knowledge from beyond this world. Let's begin inside the Vatican itself. In a small, rarely visited side chapel, there are statues that look wrong. Human in posture, but not in form. Elongated heads, deep-set eyes. Proportions that mimic no known human anatomy. Church officials say they are symbolic, representations of angels, but others aren't so sure. Some independent researchers believe these statues depict beings that came from the sky. Messengers, not of God, but of something older, something cosmic. They wear robes, yes, but beneath them are features that resemble depictions found in ancient Sumeria and Mesoamerica. Could these statues be artistic metaphors? Or were they modeled after something the early church had seen? Now to the Codex Vaticanus, one of the oldest and most complete versions of the Bible, but hidden within its margins, rarely shown to the public, are annotations, sketches, and cryptic symbols. Some of them depict beings descending from above surrounded by light, but they lack wings. They are spherical, mechanical, almost artificial. Could early translators have confused technology with divinity? Could what they called chariots of fire or clouds of glory have been something else entirely? Something engineered? Now let's look at architecture. Giza, Teotihuacan, Across the world, ancient civilizations built pyramids, ziggurats, and temples with staggering precision. Many of them aligned perfectly with Orion's belt, Sirius, or the solstices. But here's what no one can explain. These civilizations were separated by oceans. They never met. They never traded. They never shared ideas. So why did they build the same things? Why did their gods descend from the sky? Why did they all speak of beings who taught them math, astronomy, and the secrets of stone? Some say it's coincidence. Others call it collective memory. But maybe, just maybe, it's something simpler. Maybe they all met the same visitors. 3 connections. Statues of beings that are not quite human. Manuscripts that describe objects too advanced for their time. And structures around the world, built as if guided by a cosmic hand. If this is true, then we were never alone. And the greatest cathedrals on earth might be copies of something built far beyond the stars. Not all prayers are meant to be spoken, and not all rituals are meant to be remembered. Some unlock doors. Others open things we were never meant to touch. For centuries, the Church has warned against occult knowledge, forbidden rites, ancient texts. But what if they weren't false? What if they worked? Let's start in Babylon. Thousands of years ago, priests performed ceremonies beneath starlit skies, rituals to summon what they called watchers. These weren't just symbolic gods. They were described as actual beings who descended from above, shining like metal and speaking languages no human had ever heard. Some of these rituals involved fire, blood, and geometry. Complex patterns carved into stone altars, chants that mimicked frequencies found in deep space. The Church later condemned these rites as demonic, but fragments of them still survive in museums on clay tablets, locked away from public view. Now shift west to the ancient Canaanites. Among the ruins of Ugarit, archaeologists found tablets inscribed with invocation texts, scripts designed not to praise, but to call forth. They spoke of drawing the breath of the dead into vessels, of placing relics beneath specific stars, of returning the soul to the threshold between worlds. Some texts reference the name El Shaddai, one of the oldest names for God, but in a context far removed from the Bible. These weren't worshipers. They were engineers of spirit, and many of these rituals match those found in Jewish mysticism, early Gnosticism, even pre-Islamic texts. Were they tapping into the same hidden current, or awakening something older than all religion? Now to a man named Enoch, a figure mentioned briefly in the Bible, but far more extensively in the apocryphal book of Enoch, banned by most Christian denominations. According to the text, Enoch was taken by angels, shown the structure of the heavens, given a calendar of 364 days exactly, a divine calendar that aligned with celestial events and sacred cycles. He was told to teach it to humanity, but it was rejected, erased, replaced with the solar-lunar calendars we use today. Why? Some say the 364-day cycle was designed to unlock time itself, to guide not just agriculture but prophecy, ritual, contact, Three forgotten systems: Babylonian summoning, Canaanite soul calling, Enochian timekeeping, all banned, all buried, all echoing the same idea that there is a pattern, a formula, a structure beneath the surface of belief, and those who understand it can bend reality itself. They were young, innocent, gifted, and then gone. History tells stories of kings and prophets, but the stories it forgets most easily are about children, especially the ones who saw too much. Let's begin in the Vatican itself. Deep within classified archives are rumored files labeled Puri Miraculosi, the miraculous children. These were boys and girls said to have spoken in unknown languages, drawn complex symbols they'd never been taught, predicted disasters days before they happened. Some were taken in by the church, others were studied, then disappeared into institutions with no names. Whispers say one girl recited verses from an extinct Aramaic dialect at age 4, without ever hearing the language. Another boy drew a star map of a constellation not yet discovered. No records remain, just silence. Now to history's missing prophets. In medieval Europe, several accounts speak of children who received visions, floods, wars, the rise and fall of empires. Some were revered for a time, but as their predictions grew darker, they vanished, removed from church documents, their names scrubbed from monastic records. One such child predicted that a voice not of man will speak from above the holy place. Another described a book that cannot be burned, that no fire will touch. Their words were dismissed as madness until fragments of their visions surfaced centuries later in private Vatican journals. Why erase them? Maybe because they were right. And then the third secret of Fatima. In 1917, 3 children in Portugal claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to them. She gave them 3 messages. 2 were revealed. The third was sealed. The church released a version in 2000, a vague prophecy about the persecution of Christians, but many believe it was a cover story. One of the children, Sister Lucia, reportedly wrote that the final secret included a vision of a great rupture, a false church, a voice from the stars, and a figure dressed in white who would betray his own flock. Even popes have hinted that the full message has never been released. 3 stories, children who dreamed beyond human limits, visions that shook the very foundation of faith, prophecies too dangerous to speak aloud. They were called chosen, but history made them vanish. And if their words were true, then something has been coming for a long, long time. They were young, innocent, gifted, and then gone. History tells stories of kings and prophets, but the stories it forgets most easily are about children, especially the ones who saw too much. Let's begin in the Vatican itself. Deep within classified archives are rumored files labeled Puri Miraculosi, the miraculous children. These were boys and girls said to have spoken in unknown languages, drawn complex symbols they'd never been taught, predicted disasters days before they happened. Some were taken in by the church, others were studied, then disappeared into institutions with no names. Whispers say one girl recited verses from an extinct Aramaic dialect at age 4, without ever hearing the language. Another boy drew a star map of a constellation not yet discovered. No records remain, just silence. Now to history's missing prophets. In medieval Europe, several accounts speak of children who received visions, floods, wars, the rise and fall of empires. Some were revered for a time, but as their predictions grew darker, they vanished, removed from church documents, their names scrubbed from monastic records. One such child predicted that a voice not of man will speak from above the holy place. Another described a book that cannot be burned, that no fire will touch. Their words were dismissed as madness until fragments of their visions surfaced centuries later in private Vatican journals. Why erase them? Maybe because they were right. And then the third secret of Fatima. In 1917, 3 children in Portugal claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to them. She gave them 3 messages. 2 were revealed. The third was sealed. The Church released a version in 2000, a vague prophecy about the persecution of Christians, but many believe it was a cover story. One of the children, Sister Lucia, reportedly wrote that the final secret included a vision of a great rupture, a false church, a voice from the stars, and a figure dressed in white who would betray his own flock. Even popes have hinted that the full message has never been released. 3 stories, children who dreamed beyond human limits, visions that shook the very foundation of faith, prophecies too dangerous to speak aloud. They were called chosen, but history made them vanish. And if their words were true, then something has been coming for a long, long time. We were told that all men die, that the body decays. That time spares no one. But what if that's not entirely true? What if some bodies don't obey the rules, and some souls never leave? Let's begin with the saints who never ate. Throughout history, there are dozens of accounts of men and women who lived for years, sometimes decades, without consuming food or water. One such case is Saint Catherine of Siena, who reportedly lived only on the Eucharist for years. Another is Therese Neumann, a German mystic who stopped eating at age 25 and lived nearly 40 more years. Doctors examined her, watched her, found no deception, no malnutrition, no decline. When asked how she survived, she said, "I am fed by what you cannot see." The Church never canonized her, but they also never disproved her. Now to a hermit, a figure known only as the Watcher. Hidden in the Carpathian Mountains, he was said to be over 200 years old. Villagers claimed he never aged, that his eyes were bright, that he spoke in riddles, but always of future events. In 1939, a Polish priest documented a meeting with him. He wrote, "This man speaks as if time is something he no longer belongs to." After the war, the Watcher vanished, but stories of a wandering immortal persisted across 3 countries. Was he a myth, a metaphor, or a man who discovered something ancient and escaped the reach of time? And finally, the martyrs who wouldn't die. During the Roman persecutions, there were Christians who were tortured, burned, even beheaded, only to survive. One girl was thrown into a furnace and emerged untouched. Another was drowned, then woke up 3 days later in a tomb, smiling. The Church documented these events, but quietly labeled many of them symbolic. Yet relics of these same people are still venerated in basilicas. Incorrupt bones, heart tissue that never blackened, skin that refused to rot. Why? What kind of force holds life inside a body long after death? 3 mysteries, people who never needed food, a man who outlived generations, and believers who simply refused to die. Are these miracles or signs that some humans have touched a different law of nature? Maybe immortality isn't a gift. Maybe it's knowledge. And maybe someone somewhere has already unlocked it. We're told we live once, that when we die it ends, heaven or hell, light or darkness. But what if death isn't the end? What if the soul doesn't vanish, but returns? Let's begin with what the Vatican never speaks of publicly, but tracks in secret. For decades, there have been reports of children, young, barely able to read, describing lives they never lived. They name towns, families, even causes of death. Some draw maps of villages they've never visited. Others speak languages they were never taught. In 1972, a Vatican-affiliated research unit quietly investigated over 40 of these cases. The files were labeled Anima Aetram, the soul again. Most of the cases were from India, Tibet, and South America, but a few came from Italy, Spain, even within walking distance of the Vatican walls. None of those files were ever published. Now to the stories of soul transfer. In rare and deeply disturbing cases, adults have reported a sudden, violent shift in identity. They wake up knowing things they shouldn't, memories not their own, phobias they never had, allergies that appear overnight. One woman in France reportedly woke up speaking fluent ancient Greek after a near-death experience. Another man in Brazil claimed to be a 17th century sailor and provided details of a shipwreck only confirmed years later. Are these mental disorders, or moments when a soul from the past re-enters a living body? And finally, one of the most unusual stories buried in the Vatican's historical journals. A 19th century priest began experiencing recurring visions of deserts, ancient cities, a life lived under another name. He began writing in a script that no scholar could recognize. Later, it was matched to early Akkadian. He claimed in his private writings that he had once been a priest of a forgotten god, that he had betrayed his temple, and now, centuries later, was sent to serve again in a different church. When he died, his journals were sealed. Some believe he was delusional. Others believe he remembered. 3 mysteries: children who remember dying, adults who become someone else, and a priest who claimed to have lived twice. If reincarnation is real, then the soul is not bound by time, not by creed, not even by death. And the question isn't, can we come back? It's, how many times have we already been here? Science was meant to measure the body, but what happens when it tries to measure the soul? For centuries, the Vatican has warned against mixing faith with technology, but behind closed doors, others tried. Let's begin with a machine. In the 1930s, an Italian priest and physicist named Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have built a device, a chronovisor. It wasn't designed to hear confessions, but to record echoes of the past. Not voices, but vibrations of the soul. Ernetti claimed he saw visions of Christ's crucifixion, ancient speeches, lost music. The machine was dismantled. The Vatican denied it ever existed, but Ernetti's notes remained. And years later, patents surfaced that mirrored his design. Was he lying? Or did he prove that memory and spirit leave a mark on reality? Now to the relics. Across the world, churches possess sacred objects, pieces of wood, bones of saints, shards of the cross. But what if they're more than symbols? In 1997, a group of researchers in Poland tested a reliquary said to contain a saint's hand. When placed near sensitive instruments, electromagnetic patterns shifted, plants grew faster, water crystallized differently. The church stopped the study, but the data was leaked. Some relics, it turns out, emit low-frequency fields, not explainable by the material they're made of. What are they resonating with? And why does the church treat them like radioactive cores, locked in vaults, touched only by gloved hands? Finally, ritual astrology, a practice banned since the Middle Ages, but still used in secret. In the 1600s, Jesuit scholars attempted to chart not just the stars, but human souls. They created maps connecting planetary movement to emotion, memory, even dreams. Some monks believed eclipses were gateways, moments when spiritual energy could be magnified. Others used lunar cycles to predict visions or induce them. One monk reportedly entered a trance during a solstice alignment. When he awoke, he spoke in riddles for 3 days, describing events that would happen in 3 centuries. Every word was recorded, then locked away. The document has never been seen again. 3 forbidden paths, a machine to hear the soul, a relic that pulses with invisible force, and maps that link the cosmos to the spirit. Are these experiments or blueprints? And if the spirit can be measured, then maybe it can be moved. We think time moves in one direction. That space is fixed. That heaven is above and earth is below. But what if those lines blur? What if they already have? Let's begin with time itself. There are stories, quiet ones, of moments when time stopped. A monastery in Spain, where a candle stayed lit for 3 days but never burned down. A clock in a Polish cathedral that froze for exactly 13 minutes, right as the congregation prayed for a boy who had just drowned. When he was pulled from the water, he was alive, with no brain damage and no explanation. In 1984, a Vatican astronomer wrote in a sealed paper, "If time can bend, then prayer may not be about reaching God, but aligning with Him." The paper was never released. Now to the messengers, angels, not as winged cherubs, but as beings of light. In multiple cases across Europe and South America, people have reported encounters with glowing entities that stopped car crashes, led them out of fires, or whispered warnings just before tragedy struck. But here's what's strange. These beings don't always speak. They transmit emotion, vision, soundless clarity, and they vanish in a blink. Witnesses describe them as pure intelligence, energy in form, not from here but not frightening. Some researchers believe these are momentary crossings between dimensions. Others believe they are echoes from a higher realm. The church calls them miracles, but never investigates them fully. And finally, those who almost died. Near-death experiences often follow the same pattern. A tunnel, a presence, a conversation without words. One man said, "I stood before a being made of memory. It knew everything I had ever done and loved me anyway." Another said he asked to stay, The response, "You still have questions, go back." In multiple cases, people returned with knowledge they couldn't explain, mathematical patterns, lost languages, even drawings of star systems only recently discovered. 3 phenomena: time that bends, light that walks beside us, and messengers waiting at the threshold between life and death. What if these aren't anomalies? What if they're intersections? Portals where dimensions touch, where heaven leans close enough to breathe. And what if the Vatican knows, because it's standing right at the center? Not every gospel made it into the Bible. Some were erased, hidden, burned, not because they were false, but because they were dangerous. Dangerous to authority, to power, to control. Let's begin with Mary Magdalene. In 1896, a fragile papyrus was discovered in Egypt. It told a different story. Mary wasn't just a follower, she was a teacher, a voice, the one Jesus trusted most. In the Gospel of Mary, she speaks of inner vision, of the soul's ascent. She says salvation comes not through fear, but through knowledge. She challenges Peter, leads the disciples, and speaks of a direct connection to the divine. The church rejected it, said it was Gnostic fiction. But why did early Christian communities preserve it in secret? And why did it survive at all if it wasn't sacred? Now to Judas. In 2006, a lost gospel emerged from a cave in Egypt. It was the Gospel of Judas. And it shocked the world. Because in it, Judas wasn't a traitor, he was chosen. Jesus asked him to betray, not as a sin, but as a necessary step, a sacrifice, a secret between them. The text suggests Jesus wanted to leave his earthly body. That death was not defeat, but escape. The church condemned it instantly. Heresy, deception. But scholars noted its language was authentic, its theology ancient. What if Judas wasn't evil? What if the betrayal was part of the plan? And finally, Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is unlike any other. It contains no miracles, no crucifixion, no resurrection, just words, sayings. 114 of them. Jesus says, "Split a piece of wood and I am there. Lift a stone and you will find me." He tells the listener, the kingdom is inside you and outside you. He says, when you come to know yourselves, then you will realize you are children of the living Father. No rituals, no priests, no intermediaries, just awakening. The church couldn't allow that. Because if you don't need a gatekeeper, you can walk straight through the gates. 3 gospels, one from a woman silenced, one from a man cursed, one from a teacher who taught only truth. They were erased, not because they lied, but because they empowered. And when you control what people read, you control what they believe. Not all saints are remembered in stained glass. Some are hidden, forgotten, or buried on purpose, because their stories raise questions the church has no answer for. Let's begin with Malachi, a 12th century Irish archbishop who claimed to receive visions from God, not of heaven, but of the future. He wrote down a list, 112 Latin phrases, each one describing a future pope, by symbol, by motto, by deed. For centuries, his prophecy matched every new pope, from the sailor pope to the olive branch. The 111th entry described Pope Benedict XVI. The 112th, the final pope, is listed as Peter the Roman, the one who would see Rome destroyed, the end of the church, the last shepherd. Today, we are on that entry. The Vatican has never officially recognized or rejected the prophecy. They just don't talk about it. Now to a man with no name. In the 18th century, Vatican guards noticed a pilgrim who came every year. Same day, same time. Always silent. He wore simple robes, carried no money, slept outside. One year, a young priest followed him. The man walked straight into St. Peter's Basilica despite the guards. He stood before the altar, prayed without speaking, and vanished. No one ever saw him again. The priest who followed him later said, "I don't know if he was a man or a message." And finally, miracles the church never explains. In remote monasteries across Europe and South America, there are records of hosts, the Eucharistic bread that changed. One turned to blood. Another grew warm, hot enough to blister the hand. One was found as stone, solid, heavy, as if the spirit inside had fossilized. These relics were hidden, some locked in vaults, others quietly buried, because the church fears misinterpretation. But what if they're not accidents? What if they're warnings? Or evidence of something beyond symbolism? Three mysteries, a prophecy almost complete, a man who may not have been human, and miracles too real to make official. If sainthood is about power, purity, and proximity to the divine, then maybe the most sacred souls were the ones the world wasn't supposed to notice. They said science would answer everything, that the microscope would kill the myth, that data would defeat belief. But the closer science looked, the stranger things became. Let's begin with a book that vanished. In 1910, a Jesuit scholar wrote a manuscript titled The Structure of the Soul. It wasn't poetry, it was formula, charts, frequencies. He believed the soul had a shape, a pattern, a measurable signature. For 5 years, he tested it using early forms of magnetic imaging. He claimed he could detect a departure event from the body at the moment of death. His work was praised, then seized. The Vatican said it risked confusion. The manuscript was never seen again. Now to an invention few know exists: a soul camera. In the 1960s, a priest scientist in Argentina created a device using ultraviolet and infrared sensors. He claimed it could photograph energy fields around the body. He called it the anima lens. When he aimed it at living subjects, a glow appeared, unique to each person. But at the moment of death, the glow either disappeared or flared into brilliant, chaotic bursts. One photo showed a spiral of light leaving a woman's chest. It was never published. The church confiscated the device. Finally, experiments in consciousness. In 2008, an anonymous team in Europe tested monks and nuns during deep prayer. Their brain waves became synchronized, but something else happened. The electrical activity in the room, lights, sensors, magnetic coils shifted, slightly, consistently, as if the mind had created a field. They repeated the test dozens of times, same result, but when they published it, backlash came fast. The church issued no statement, but the research team disbanded. Silently, three mysteries: a missing theory of the soul, a lens that saw what eyes could not, and a human mind affecting the world around it. Maybe science didn't disprove spirit, maybe it found it, and maybe that's why it had to stop. Some secrets are hidden in documents, others in vaults. But the most dangerous ones are hidden in us. Because if we ever remembered who we really are, what we were created to be, it would change everything. Let's return to the beginning. Genesis says man was made in the image of God. But what does that mean? Some ancient texts say we were not just physical, we were radiant, carriers of frequency, light, thought, that the fall of man wasn't about fruit, but forgetting, losing access to what we already had. Now to the Vatican's greatest fear, unity of knowledge. What if religion, science, and consciousness were never meant to be separate? What if they were three sides of the same truth? Throughout these 76 secrets, we've seen patterns: censorship, burial, fear, but also connection. Maps drawn before history began, tombs no one dares to open, books written in languages never spoken, lights that descend from the sky, beings that walk among us, children who remember what adults forgot. The deeper we dig, the more one thing becomes clear. The world we were taught is incomplete. We were told to believe, not to seek. But curiosity is a holy fire, and once it's lit, it cannot be undone. So now you've seen what they tried to hide. The question is, what will you do with it?